As we get older, it's fair to think that our fastest years are behind us. But hold that thought and check out this incredible story. Meet Dan King, and at 61 years old, decided to try to break the world record for the 1 mile. The record for his age group was 4 minutes and 51 seconds. And when Dan crossed the finish line, he was a new world record holder and became the first person in their 60s to run a mile in less than 4 minutes and 50 seconds. But here's the fascinating part. When I talked to Dan on the Run Smarter podcast, he said this.
The hilarious thing is I actually did improve in my 60s over probably anything I did in my 50s.
How is that possible? Luckily, Dan was grateful enough to share his unique yet simple training approach that any runner can adopt if they want to rewind the clock and start running fast again. But ironically, secret number 1 has nothing to do with running.
I think when I turned 40, I sort of made a decision to redefine myself as just an endurance athlete and not a runner.
Now this sounds counterintuitive and is why Dan's training approach is so unique. Because you might think to be a better runner, you just need to run more. But identifying yourself as an overall endurance athlete and giving yourself space for other fitness disciplines gives you a great opportunity to build a superior cardiovascular system without subjecting your body to high running loads that are so closely linked to injury.
And then I ran the club cross-country national championships in December, and I won my age group there. And so when I look back on that whole year, I'd only run 500 miles in total. But I had trained a ton. I had cycled more than 2,500 miles. I had done a lot of elliptical training and a lot of swimming.
Check out this graph, which shows even when running at slow speeds, the ground reaction force our body needs to absorb is over 2.5 times our body weight every single step. Imagine that force multiplied tens of thousands of times during a standard weekend run. This emphasizes the importance of offloading the running load and replacing it with other forms of activity.
I don't run the mile fast because I have great speed. I run the mile fast because I just have a huge cardiorespiratory fitness level.
And the added benefit of having this approach is having more exercise options for situations such as being injured. It's like having countless tools in your tool shed and knowing exactly how to use each one for any situation. If you're getting knee pain, reduce the amount of running and cycling and pump up the time spent on the elliptical. Having foot or calf issues, do some extra swimming sessions. In fact, Dan talks about his long battle with plantar fasciitis and still managed to win the cross-country national championship that year, all because he had these tools at his disposal.
Let's hear it for Mr. King. Let's see if he can go under sub 30. Bring him in, folks.
And if you approach training in the same way, you'll be more consistent with your training all year round and therefore get better and better results decade after decade. But Dan mentioned earlier that he still dedicates some time to running, but with such low running mileage, what is his secret to getting so fast?
Zone 1 and Zone 2 training, cross training, and maybe every 4th day would be kind of higher intensity type of running.
Now you might be thinking Dan's higher intensity training involves really pushing his body to the limits, but Dan follows an approach called the easy interval method.
Easy interval training is basically you're moving into and out of, call it comfortable intervals, like every 6th day, which would be about every 3rd run.
So when Dan is base training, he likes to do 6 repeats of 1K efforts at marathon to half marathon pace with an 800 meter recovery, which is fast, but not that fast. And when it comes to race season, his easy interval sessions look more like this. And I should also point out that he includes a 10-second walk before and after each interval. But Dan also enjoys another type of workout, which I believe is pivotal for his success.
I love to run uphill. And so my harder sessions are going to be either longer uphill runs at threshold or even shorter stuff at a faster pace. I have about a 16-minute steady climb that I'll do at between 85 to 88% of my max heart rate. I'll have about 4 minutes of recovery, and then I have a shorter second loop that's a big climb, but that one's only maybe about 6 minutes of additional climbing.
This decision is supported by the research, which strongly recommends developing calf strength if your goal is to run faster into older age. And uphill workouts are perfect for this because your calves will work hard fighting the effects of gravity while dampening the harsh ground reaction forces we mentioned earlier. Just be careful and introduce these sessions gradually if you haven't had much experience with them. It's perfectly fine to start conservatively and give your body some time to adapt. Now, there is no denying that heavy, progressive strength training plays a huge role in running faster as we age. And as Dan explained, it's never too late to start.
I think I've known strength training has been important since I was 40, but I completely ignored it that entire decade. And then I started playing around with it a little bit in my 50s. And then finally, after I turned 60, I actually have made a much more committed effort to actually have a decent strength routine now.
So these are some of Dan's most important leg exercises, which he does 2 or 3 times a week. You can see by looking at the list, they're quite challenging for a runner at any age. So make a conscious effort to progress the weights as you get stronger and not become complacent. This approach will combat the effects of dwindling muscle mass, which is natural as we age, as well as adapting stiffer tendons and stronger bones, which are crucial if you want to run faster. While we're on the topic of adaptation, did you know that the older you are, the longer your body needs to fully recover from a bout of exercise? Think of it like an elastic band. When it's new, the elastic band snaps back into shape really quickly after being stretched. But as we get older and more weathered, the elastic band takes longer to return to its original state, which is why leveling up your recovery strategies is a must if you want to perform at your best. What elements of your recovery do you focus on?
The 2 things that I feel like support outside of my training are just making sure I get good quality sleep and enough sleep, and eating good foods, healthy foods. And maybe the 3rd thing is not putting too many other toxins in my system like alcohol.
Dan is spot on here because research tells us for runners, sleep is the best recovery tool we have, and therefore is the best method to return our elastic band back to its original state. But if you feel you're lacking in this department, try going to bed earlier, cooling and darkening your room, and avoid things like alcohol and caffeine several hours before bed. Now get ready for this one because Dan's next secret is one of the most profound bits of advice if you want to achieve similar success.
This isn't really so much the way you train, but it's sort of the way you think. And what I have appreciated as I've gotten older is that there's just sort of power and magic in thinking about and dreaming about big goals that you want. The goal seeds I plant tend to be big things that have much of a chance of not being achieved as being achieved, but that's what makes them fun for me. And if you miss them, you look back and say, yeah, the process is still positive overall for me.
Keep an eye out for the full conversation on the Run Smarter podcast. And while this is just one case study, if you're looking for strong recommendations on how to run faster as you age that is backed up by research, then check out this video.